right. Hello, Judy.
Hi, Harriet.
It's really good to be with you today.
Good to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So, to set the context a little bit, we've done some other videos that are more of an overview of RCT. So, if anyone is jumping on this video and you haven't watched those or you're not familiar with RCT, look back in the series because there are some videos there that will provide you with an overview of the theory and give you some of the background. But today, what we wanted to focus on is thinking about relational cultural theory and social change. Going back to when Jean Baker Miller and you and Irene Stiver and Janet Surrey were developing what would become relational cultural theory. And just to get started, sort of, what do you remember from those early days?
Well, first of all, Jean always referred to it as a work in progress, not a theory, which says something very important about the issues of power and in the early development of the work. Um, Initially, it was not well received by many people. A lot of women therapists, a lot of feminists were there interested in it, but a lot of clinicians and people in organizations were very skeptical about it and very rejecting of it. So it was an uphill battle. Um, and I think it was, at the time, I think I didn't even realize how big a change we were asking for in terms of people's understanding of human nature, of change. And I think that it really was threatening to people. But as I've joked, you know, first they ignored it, then they said it was dangerous, then they said they knew it all along. So that's the process of assimilation that goes on, and it certainly happened for us too. I mean, there was ignoring us, then it was sort of saying this is really you're suggesting scary changes in therapy, and then the final resting place was, of course, we knew this before you did. Um, oh well.
Yeah. Okay. And so, do you remember, did you know from the very beginning, did you all anticipate that you would meet resistance? Or did you
Oh
really?
yeah. I mean, we knew this was not going to be a popular theory or a popular approach to understanding people. I don't think we did anything special to counter it. I mean, we just knew it was going to happen, and we resisted it as best we could. I was teaching in a teaching hospital, and a lot of the students who came there, interns came there, psychology interns for clinical training, and a lot of them would come looking for RCT, and then the system there, the traditional system, would sort of say, "You better watch out. That's not important. That's dangerous." So we were dealing with it on a daily level as well as a more theoretical level, which was to sort of support people who were trying to be open to it and
And
interested in it.
when you and I were talking about having this conversation, I think part of what I was saying is I'm really interested in how the development of RCT was an act of leadership and change, right? So, um, can you say more about? So you said you didn't do much to prepare for the pushback you would get, but I wonder how you dealt with it. So you went off to a conference and you all met resistance. How did you, with each other, deal with that tension and that stress?
I think we were there for each other, which was really important. I mean, I think when you get that kind of resistance, it can make you doubt yourself and feel uncertain of what you're doing. And I think then having each other was incredibly important. And in the beginning, when we went out to do presentations, and we did those pretty early on, in the beginning, we would typically try to have more than one person. We try to have at least two of us go out so that we could give each other support. And I think that really made a difference. I mean, that was sort of walking the talk. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I wonder, this is going to sound maybe basic, but um, so it seems to me in that snapshot, right? You are going out to present at least two or three of you together because you know you're going to face resistance, and you find strength in being together and having that connection. So again, this is pretty basic, but some folks watching this will be new to the theory. How does that give us sort of almost a deeper glimpse of RCT in action, that very scenario?
Yeah. Well, in a way, people say, are you talk about being engaged in social action and social change. but really you're just developing theory. And we're saying, well, actually, if you really think of human beings differently, basically differently, and you think of human nature as basically different from what was being presented by others, that is contributing to social change. One evening, I remember actually when we were, we did get discouraged at times. It was hard to kind of keep up the outflow of our theory or understanding. But I remember one evening when we were together at Jean's house, where we met initially once a week or once every other week. And I remember somebody in the group, I don't know who started it, whether it was Jean or Irene or Jan or me, but one of us was saying how we didn't feel very competent, or we felt like, well, gee, maybe these people are right. This is, like one person said, this is a flash in the pan. This isn't really anything that's going to stick. And I remember when this person said that other people, I looked at them and I thought, God, these women who I admire, who I know are so intelligent and so courageous, and here we all are sitting around in this little knot of self-doubt.
Mhm.
And that was a very important moment. It was sort of like, oh my God, um, these very who people I admired enormously, and they're talking about their own self-doubt. And I mean that's kind of the way change doesn't happen, is when people step in and say this is a crazy theory, or this is a stupid stupid idea, or it's not going to last. Or so the erosion was always happening. But to come back and say, well, look at this, Jean Baker Miller just admitted that she sometimes feels like she has nothing to say. Really? So I think that was true. Sometimes in conferences there'd be a lot of positive feedback in the conference itself about the workshop or whatever it was, and there'd be one person at the end who would always sort of raise his hand from the back of the room and throw a bombshell at us. And so we would sort of joke about, don't ever call on the last person in the room raising their hand. I mean, so there was humor,
Mhm.
there was getting perspective together, and there was this group was intensely passionate about the work. So it was very task oriented and very filled with passion and a sense of urgency. I mean, it's interesting when I think of today's world, and I think we are just all faced with an incredible urgency to change the basic dynamics and the shape of the culture. And it was a different kind of urgency, but it was already there. The sense that if we were, quote, going to save the world or do good in the world, we really had to dig in and be strong and have courage. And I think I wrote a paper at some point about courage and connection, which is, it isn't like courage standing there by yourself being a big strong person. It's really the courage that's developed in connection, that we support each other's courage, we validate each other. And I think that really did make a difference. And then when Jean was the one again who said, let's get this out into the world. The world needs this model. We had no intention. We were just looking at women's lives and trying to understand them better, and thinking that the existing theories did not represent our experience very well.
Yeah. So you've connected this to our current context, which of course is a big part of what motivated this conversation that we both have wanted to have. And so when you think about, I think there's so many forces at work right now that are pushing people to give up and to isolate and to sort of walk away. And so I wonder if you could say more about how RCT informs the importance of us staying together. I think the piece you're talking about with courage and connection, and I'll link to that article in the notes below the video when I post it. But that idea that sort of the forces are pushing us apart, and the importance of coming together, and why that's important, maybe for even for some, folks who are feeling really down, really inclined to just isolate because of the level of overwhelm. So what can you say about that importance of connection in times like this?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is, I mean, one of the books that I edited was, I think it was called Power of Connection. Power of Connection, and sort of like, um, there really is power in connection, and we have all sorts of data, including neurobiological, psychiatric data, that says connections change the brain, connections change the way we live. That a lot of what we're seeing now is manipulation with fear.
Mhm.
That if you bully and make people afraid, you can manipulate them. If you shame them into thinking their reality isn't a good reality or isn't the real reality, that you can silence them and you can maintain power. So manipulation of fear, and the natural response to fear is actually to reach out to others, to get support, to give support. And that latter is very important because it isn't just a get model, it's a give and get. And it's the whole notion of mutuality, which is central to the work and central to the dismantling of the power arrangements. So to really look at the ways that that gets manipulated, because now when people are fearful, they're labeled as weak. So there's a lot in the power arrangements that is challenged by this mutuality, by the sense of mutual change. Both people are changed. That completely rearranges that the one person is changing another or controlling another person. Completely changes that. But it's not an easy path, and the culture doesn't. The culture is so determined to think of change as individual in the individual, not looking at context, not looking at the ways that we have to change the social context. We pretend if we just change something in the individual, that's where things happen. Yes, as therapists or educators, we are interested in helping people grow and change.
So I think the
But
work that, you and Jean and the others were doing, I mean, later joined by Maureen Walker and Amy Banks, um, for me, that's also a powerful example about how sort of we come together and create change. I mean, like none of you were famous, right? None of you held high political position. But when I think about the impact that the work has had and how far-reaching RCT has been, I mean, Jean began her work in the 70s, right? And here we are in 2025. And, you and I know there are studies and dissertations coming out regularly. There are community centers built and community, mental health support organizations built around RCT. There's change work in education, activism, ecology. I mean, the reach of RCT is huge. And this was started by initially four women and then joined by, other women along the way and men eventually who came together, sitting around in a living room or meeting, in a building somewhere on a campus and talking through these ideas. And the level of change seems significant. So I think it's also an example of that sort of coming together, the power of people coming together and the potential reach of that power, even though it can seem like, well, I'm not a, CEO or a president, I'm a psychologist and I'm meeting with this other group of psychologists. How much change can we affect? And then we look at what you all have created and where it's gone, and it seems monumental to me.
yeah, I just for the fun of it this morning before we met, I went to Google Scholar, and I don't do it regularly anymore, but I should because it's incredibly validating. There were like 6 articles that referred to relational culture. Now, not all of them are relational cultural model at the center, but they're used in dissertations and research, and it's just got a life of its own. And I
Mhm.
think it has a life of its own because it really appeals. It appeals to people's understanding. Of course, that's what happened early on with therapy. People said, of course, the connection in therapy is important. Well, of course, the connections change the brain. Well, of course, but there it is out there. We're not in touch with most of those people. They don't write us and say, hi, I used your theory in my dissertation. I mean, some do, but a lot don't. It just shows up in the literature. And I mean, this is one of the things that I feel. I was going to say this at the end of our talk, but I think that I feel this is a very hopeful theory. It says we're wired for social connection. We need connection like we need air and water. We can see how the brain, it depends on connection, how social the brain is. We can see how relationships change the brain as well as behavioral patterns. But yeah, it was referred to as a revolution in psychology. And it's kind of a quiet revolution in a way. It just kind of is happening. And I know, Harriet, you have been very important in terms of bringing this work into educational theory and understanding. And that's the way things spread
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah.
So, are there particular RCT concepts that you think would be helpful to people who are working for social change?
Um, I want to sort of clarify this notion of self-interest because it's at the core of so much of people's understanding of motivation. Is it sort of like it paints the picture of human nature as selfish, looking out for oneself only. There's a sense that self-interest is a biological imperative. That's the way we stay alive. And actually, it's a social prescription, very different from a biological imperative. If you see it as a biological imperative, it leads to a pessimism in terms of social change. You can't, you sort of shrug your shoulders and say, that's human nature. What can we do? It's like what people used to do with boys and aggression. They'd say, well, boys will be boys. It's sort of like you can't change it. This is hardwired. And really, it is not hardwired. It is not the major motivation. And what we talk about is really the major motivation is movement toward mutual empathy and mutuality. And that is definitely undercuts existing notions of power.
Yeah.
If I am open to being changed by you and you are open to being changed by me, which is in effect what mutuality is all about, mutual empathy is all about. And Maureen Walker talks about it by talking about radical empathy or disruptive empathy, I guess is which the term that she's using now. And in fact, all empathy is disrupted in some ways if you think about it, because it really, you are opening to change. There's an uncertainty, there's a not knowing, there's a not being in control. There's a way in which both people are having to exist in this milieu of mutual change and with mutual respect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting the way you're unpacking mutuality is so fundamental uh to creating change and in some ways I think for those of us who try to live from an RCT perspective, um, you know, being clear on the importance of mutuality and keeping it in mind and staying connected with it is fundamental to, I think, keeping us grounded in that RCT perspective that we're trying to live from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've been sort of thinking about more recently is that I mean, psychology, unfortunately, is my field. I think has really contributed to this sort of hyper individualism and sort of studying change through quote intrapsychic change and really neglecting the need for social change. I talk about if anybody that considers themselves a change agent,
Mhm.
educator, clinician, manager, anybody who thinks of themselves as a change agent really has to address the larger milieu that is creating the isolation, the abuse, all of these things. So I think I really invite with a little edge on it that people really do. If you believe you have some skills to help bring about change, please bring them to the larger picture as well as to the individuals.
Mhm. That's a really good lead into my last question, which is, so what advice do you have for people who feel aligned with RCT and maybe identify as RCT practitioners, or just even learning the theory and finding that it resonates, and who are really committed to working for social change in this time and place?
Find a group, find other people who think as you do, or maybe just think a little differently, so you're not just mirroring each other. But find a group, not even a group, find another person who says, this is really good stuff. I love it. Oh, you do? So do I. Here's what I've been thinking. Let's read those papers. So study groups, supervision groups. Don't try to do the change alone, because the force is still, even though connection and relationality and everything is way more accepted now
Mhm.
as being central to human nature. Um, people need support. People need support whenever they take on something that is not popular mainstream. We have to reveal the ways in which the political system manipulates relationships and manipulates people, again, through fear.
Mhm.
I think the fear is rampant right now in our culture, and I think that it is the flames are being fueled and fired in that direction. And I think to reinstate the notion that if I'm scared, I can turn to somebody and be comforted. I can feel validated. Um,
Yeah. The it seems to me that mutuality, you've talked off and on about fear in this conversation, and it seems to me that growth fostering connections are sort of like the antidote to fear, right? It's like,
absolutely, absolutely. And empathic possibility as the antidote to shame. And yes, definitely.
okay.